Audio Jungle.
Ramsey. Adam, how are you today? Good to see you. Thanks, Adam. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you for the opportunity. It is always so good to be in your presence, in your shop, and get to talk to all the really super cool petrol heads on your team.
Yeah, no, we're very lucky to have a lot of great people here. And today we're lucky to have Ramsey Potts, a founding partner and chief sales officer of the newly formed Broad Arrow Group, which has already been acquired by Hagerty.
Yes.
And is part of the Hagerty family.
Yep.
Correct?
That is correct. We're very fortunate to be associated with such a good group of people. That partnership, in the beginning, was a partnership, and quickly, I guess the term might be escalated to becoming fully integrated into their family. And what a great family to be a part of. You know, Adam, I've had the very good fortune of watching you grow your organization here, and you've expanded and become other things. You're now a Morgan dealer. And so, yeah, that Hagerty relationship for us has a lot of synergies.
Yeah, and it's interesting. A lot of people in the car industry think of Hagerty and they think of collector car insurance. They think, I went out and bought a car, State Farm or Progressive or sometimes even Chubb or Pure won't write a policy for this car, and that's what Hagerty is. But why we really have identified and why we're enjoying our affiliation with Hagerty and the partnership that we formed with you guys is that Hagerty is really trying to promote the lifestyle that is the collectible and investable automobile. Aside from just cars are fun, right? Like there's so many things that go into automobiles that we find interesting, you know? And Hagerty's really trying to kind of keep the momentum going as the older generation of car collector and car enthusiast is starting to fizzle out, and the new generation wants to Uber everywhere, and these kids are like 25 years old before they go get a driver's license.
Adam, you genuinely get it. Yeah. I'm impressed. Thank you very much. When that next opening in our marketing department happens, I think we'll give you a call.
Okay.
So we Hagerty, you have heard the phrase, and yes, to a degree it is a marketing slogan, but it's safe driving. And it is truly at the very heart and soul of what I believe Hagerty and, all three parts, the insurance, the lifestyle and media, and the marketplace, of which I'm a part of, they truly have that as their ethos. And I guess if you look at it from a business perspective, it's a rather meaningful slogan, because if we don't have, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 25 years, a Volkswagen Beetle, a Nissan, an SLR, this very special Audi, if these cars aren't still on the road and there still aren't great events and great opportunities for the enthusiasts and the collectors to enjoy them, it's going to be tough for us to insure them too, won't it, Adam?
Absolutely. And look, with one of the things that's interesting to us being in the automotive space is what's going to happen as all the manufacturers go towards electrification. What does it mean to own an internal combustion engine car? Who's going to be able to service internal combustion engine cars? All of those things. And, look, I wish I could say I was smart enough to foresee this, but, everything that's happened in Merlin Auto Group since November 2008 when we opened, it's all happened by accident. We luckily stumble upon an opportunity and fortunately go after it. It's how we got into Ferraris. We opened a service shop because we were tired of paying other people to keep our Ferraris running. We started collecting and investing in cars because I'm not that good of a salesman, so I would buy one, I would love it, I wouldn't do a good job trying to sell it, so I would keep it. Next thing I know, 3 years later, it's worth 3 times what I paid. And I said, whoa, wait a minute, we're on to something here, right? And as cars become transportation, right, cars like this become passion, become alternative investment classes, become something that's a lifestyle as opposed to a mere tool. And that's what we find very interesting. And that's kind of where we have found a commonality with you guys.
Now, Adam, I'm not going to let you get away with one particular comment that you made. Then I'll respond and address it. There really isn't much that has happened at Merlin Auto Group that I've watched over the now 5-6 years that happened by accident. I appreciate your humility, but listen, you're a good businessman. You have employed a successful strategy, and I think every move you have made, though it involved an element of risk, which is different than an accident, it has been measured and it has been meaningful, and the result is, this incredible collection that we're broadcasting from today. And yeah, we do see that things are changing. I'm gonna rebut maybe a little bit, and at the same time concur with you on a comment that you made when you make the observation the next generation, they Uber here, they Uber there, and there's electrification and we're losing some of the internal combustion passion. But you know what, Adam? That's okay, because there's going to be some cool electric cars, and there's going to be cool next generation cars, and I think there's a whole generation of passionate petrol heads that will make a decision. To back up a second, so you and I both know those petrol heads, and they're not, I know your taste and you know my taste, it's not necessarily our target, but that they want to have a car with points and this old technology, and they can reach in and pull the plug out, and a kingpin suspension. There's going to be a generation of enthusiasts that they care about. Is it the first generation of Bosch ABS or the third generation of Bosch ABS?
Right.
Is it this type of ignition? Is it this type of, dare I say, Bluetooth in their car? And you have, to a great degree, seen that. You have played into it as a businessman, and I think that next generation of enthusiasts, the millennials, the Gen X, the Gen Z, they will be just as passionate, they will be just as enthusiastic, and it's you in organizations like yours that see that and that have this private collection that will appeal to that. I think the passion, I think the hobby is not just going to survive, I think it's going to thrive even in the age of electrification and OBD2 diagnostics. I think that's real important.
Yeah, look, I think we agree that there will be new enthusiasts.
Yes.
And I always tell people, car collecting, it's really not that new. It's getting more exposure now. It's getting more popular now.
Wow,
as
yes.
we have economic crises that people feel are completely out of their control. How many times can somebody say, well, if I buy a Ferrari for $200,000, it's never going to go to zero, right? And I have a Ferrari, right? If it happens to go to $1 million, that's great, and that's how a lot of people stumble in it. But my argument has always been that the hobby is fueled generationally, right?
Oh, yes.
I mean, I sat next to at an auction that you were at also to a gentleman that paid, I forget, multiple millions of dollars for a Model J Duesenberg.
Yes.
And I'm thinking to myself, his auction fee was probably a couple $100,000. I wouldn't pay a couple $100 for that car. I have no appreciation for that car. It's not my thing, right?
It would be if you drove one, Adam, but okay, I get your point.
What you're saying. But, he was probably a lot older than I am, right? And
probably.
The Ferrari 512 TR that I was literally drooling over, he didn't care.
Yeah.
He had no interest in it. He probably had one when it was new, it was a daily drive, it didn't matter, right? So my argument is, all these cars continue, they part of what fuels their upside potential is as the older generation stops collecting what they're collecting and the next generation starts making a little money, they want what was cool when they were a kid.
Yes.
That's what makes the stuff collectible.
Yes.
Right?
That is, I said this, I was with a group of wonderful petrolhead enthusiasts last week and did some presentations, and I made the observation, everybody in this room, because this was generally a little bit older crowd that I was speaking to with this particular mark, and I said, okay, everybody raise your hand, and there were 300 people in the audience. If you have a pair somewhere tucked away of bell-bottom jeans in your closet, or everybody raised their hand. So now keep your hand up if you still wear them. Right, and everybody's hand goes down. Look at what you're wearing today. I mean, we got Air Jordan. I mean, I got to tell you, Adam, I walked into your shop today, and I'm like, oh, my man's got some Air Jordans on. I mean, that is cool, because that is my youth.
Right.
That is our youthful lusts and desires. And every generation will choose to relive their past. I don't always say, but I find myself attaching the next generation of what's going to be truly collectible and have a new, broader appeal to what's on the radio. Now I'll explain what I mean. So I'm the youngest of 5 children, and my brother and sisters are the coolest 4 people I know on the planet Earth, and they're big music fans. And I remember growing up with each of them. So my oldest sister is in her mid to late 60s, and then the youngest one before me is just now turning in late 50s, early 60s. So, I remember they were listening to what was classic rock, and it might have been The Who and the Rolling Stones are always going to be there, and all of this Three Dog Night. And now all of a sudden I turn the radio station on when I'm in the car, and what's the classic rock, Adam? It's Duran Duran, it's Blondie, it's the stuff you and I were listening to. Right. It's what they were playing on Miami Vice. Right. And I think that is absolutely a generational thing. You're right, there will always be something special will always be truly something special. But I tell people that have older British cars, post-war, that I have to explain to them sometime. Look, your very cool British car that came out right after the war, that was appealing to all these GIs returning from Europe, and it was so meaningful and really a very impactful thing on the American motor scene at the time. There's a distinct difference between today it being worth less and worthless. Those are 2 distinctly different things. And your comment about the Ferrari, spot on, Adam, spot on.
So if somebody came to you, you're certainly, as a car specialist for
7 years now, paid to do what I do. Yes.
Right. So watching millions and millions and hundreds of millions of probably billions of dollars worth of cars transact. I would say you would be an expert and a barometer for, some key characteristics of what would be identified as a potentially investable or collectible car.
Well, I'm not immune to my own personal biases, but yes.
But I would say, like a Model J Duesenberg and a Ferrari 308, I would say there are probably some common attributes, whether it's to the brand, to the model, to the make. Are there certain things, if somebody came to you and said, Ramsey, what are the 3 most important things I should consider when trying to determine if a car, it doesn't have to be a specific example,
right?
But if a car is ever going to make the Haggerty bull market list, is a car that I can put my money in and feel relatively safe that it's going to appreciate. What are 3 things that you would say are a common denominator in everything that seems to become collectible?
Okay, so I would actually tell you that it's in my nature as a car specialist, technically I do this for a living, that one of the first attributes I would look for, and that I personally as a car specialist to tell the people to whom I speak to, is usability, accessibility. Okay. So if you have 2 particular cars for which you have an interest or a passion, and one is a Ferrari 308 and the other one might be a maybe something a bit more obscure, or parts are harder to come by, I would say if you have to lean one way or the other, make sure that you drive towards that car that I can bring it to Merlin Auto Group, and I know they can get the parts, and I know they can get the service. And listen, what good is a car? Well, to each his own. There's a car for every kind of collector for every kind of car. But me personally, what value, what joy, what satisfaction does that car bring me if it spends more time non-operational in my garage than I am taking it on a Haggerty rally, than I am bringing it here to Cars and Coffee, caffeine and octane. I want to get that visceral reward from being behind the wheel.
And strictly though, from an investment standpoint, from a value standpoint, do you find that a car that is still serviceable, albeit it requires an expert, and there may be 5 in the country, but you know where to send it? I know if I have a 1965 to 2005 Ferrari, it should go to Merlin Auto Group, right? Period. So as long as that resource is available, does that help that car stay more valuable than a car that you can't get the part and there's a chance?
Yeah, I don't know if necessarily that indicates whether or not it's going to be more valuable, but I do believe it is an indication that it will be more desirable.
Okay, which often, I say, look, I mean, you buy what you want, right?
Sure.
Like, I mean, a lot of this happened because I bought what I thought was cool.
Yeah.
And a lot of my contemporaries think it's cool too.
Yeah,
And they're out there buying them too, and there's fewer and fewer, right?
Count me in on that.
Right. So, okay. So I think that's interesting because we never advise on usability, and I mean, we collect what we know how to service, right?
But isn't that's the same thing?
No, that's exactly right. So what else would you say? What would be another thing that you would?
Does it bring you? And you and I have had this conversation. Does it bring you real joy? Does it truly hit that spot
But that's speaking more to the lifestyle side, which I understand y'all are a lifestyle business.
Yes.
I'm looking at it from, I'm somebody that has some liquidity. I want to put it in something that there's limited downside risk. I can enjoy it, but is a good investment.
Okay.
And I think cars as a good alternative investment class, right? Part of my strategy is buy something I like. Worst case scenario, if it doesn't go up in value, at least I got to come in this room and stare at my 512 TR.
Well, so
when I bought that 512 TR from your auction and everybody thought I was crazy for what I paid,
Yeah.
I knew I didn't want to sell it. It brought me a lot of joy to look at it, and if I died and it was worth the same thing I paid or a little less, I got my money's worth.
I take a lot of pride in that car, Adam, because I know how much happiness it brought you.
And so
put that
I
on
get
evidence
that, right?
for
It's the
it.
same with gambling, right? You go to Vegas, you lose $100,000, but if you had fun doing it, a lot of people chalk it up to cost of enjoyment. But if I want to go out there, just like I want to identify a blue chip stock or something like that in the market, from an investment perspective.
Okay, so I think there's a certain element of, and I'm not quite sure I'm going to say this correctly, but if the vehicle was truly special, then there's probably a pretty good chance, Adam, it will remain special then as well. If when something comes out,
Right.
and sometimes we have this conversation with somebody. Ooh, I hope I don't get in too much trouble for this, but they'll come to us and they'll say, listen, I want to sell my Jackhawk 9000.
And what better gift to give a loved one than the Jackhawk 9000?
And I think it's worth this. And they made very, very few of them. Sometimes I have to have the conversation with them, Adam, that I'm like, do you know why they made very, very few of them?
You've had that conversation with me.
Yes, so there is a supply and demand. Sometimes there is that XY axis, right?
Sure.
And I think of brands like Shelby, and I think of some of the super one-off things that Ferrari has done for their Corsa Clienti. The cars were in limited production, but at the same time there was a high demand for the car.
Sure.
An entire cross-section of the market sought that car.
Right.
And if you have that combination of something that was very special then and was truly sought after, I bet it will be as well. And my exemplar car for that, and this hasn't fallen, I don't think, on a bull market list in the past, but I look at the Subaru WRX STI, and maybe even just the WRX. Never owned one, probably never will own one, but got to drive them. Bloody Adam. I mean, they were accessible, affordable, almost supercar performance. There was the brand association with the car in rallying when that was really starting to rise in popularity, and they made a ton of them.
Right.
So it was special then, even though they made a lot, and I think it will remain special in the future.
It's interesting because one thing I always say, and part of how we got into collecting Ferraris was Enzo Ferrari started the company saying, we are always going to produce one fewer car than the market demands.
Yes.
And as a result, Ferrari has never ever had excess inventory issues.
Yeah.
You don't walk into a Ferrari store and get a big discount, year-end model, closeout. You've never seen a Ferrari commercial on TV, right? They created probably, arguably, and that's simple economics. It's supply and demand.
It is.
But one of my favorite employees of all time made a comment to me one day and said, Adam, just because it's rare doesn't mean it's valuable. Right? Ferrari.
Did you listen, Adam?
Not always.
Oh, okay, all right.
I listen a lot, right? Because at the end of the day, Ferrari on a, they're certainly making a lot more cars now. I would argue a lot of what they're making now is never going to be collectible. It's much more basic transportation. But to your point, the one-offs, right?
Oh, yeah.
Like the 488 Pista,
the Speciales, the Apertas.
Exactly. Those cars are cars that are going to be certainly special. They were special then. They were special now. That's contrary to what you said about the Subaru WRX, which I find very interesting. They made a ton of them.
They did.
But people loved them then. People love them now.
Yes.
One thing, I was looking at the 2023 bull market list.
Right? I view that WRX as a bit of an anomaly, where it was that rare combination of both mass production and always desirability.
But look, there's cars like an 84, 85, 4x4 Tacoma Toyota pickup truck.
The SR5,
right?
yeah.
Right, but you know what? That shouldn't come as a surprise. Go look at a 5-year-old Toyota Tacoma pickup truck right now with good miles.
Yes.
It's $35,000. Go look at a brand new one. It's $36,000.
Yeah.
Right? Like that. They make a ton of them, but a ton of people want them.
Yes,
right?
they do.
So, the Nissan
350Z.
Right, that's another one that's on this year's list.
And they made a ton of them.
They made a ton of them. So my argument that it's always about a supply and demand thing, it's about, make sure you make fewer than the market demands. That doesn't necessarily mean that you have to make 210.
Yes.
You could make 210,000 a year as long as 210,000 plus people per year want them. And the other thing that people really fail to realize, which is fantastic in Ferraris, but in all these cars, every year there's fewer, right? Every year one gets caught in a flood. Every year one gets caught in a fire. Every year somebody does something stupid, right? Haggerty could speak to this, their insurance arm,
yes.
right? Because I'm sure they're paying insurance claims on certain cars, right? So if you're looking at Ferrari Super Americas, for example, they made 559 over the entire course of the car's production. Car stopped. They didn't make any more after 2006, 2005, 2006. 559 cars in the world, right?
Yes.
It's 16 years later. I guarantee you all 559 don't exist.
Somewhere along the way, we lost one or two, I'm sure, somehow, somewhere. Or maybe somebody turned it into, or, at the time didn't see it for what it would be today.
Yeah. Right. And every day, somebody who wanted one of those then and said, I'll never be able to afford this, can now afford one and says, oh my gosh, right? And that's certainly more than 559 people, right? So as more of those people come up, and every year fewer and fewer cars, right?
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing. But it's cool to me, right? You don't have to be able to buy a $400,000 Super America, because also on this list is a Suzuki Cappuccino.
You bet.
Now, I happen to like those. I have I don't know why, I like little weird quirky things.
Really, Adam Merlin?
I don't like that it's right-hand drive. I've learned my lesson with right-hand drive. But, I've talked to a buddy of mine who lives in Japan about buying containers of them, bringing them over here, blah, blah. But anyway, that's a $5,000 car, probably $10,000 by the time you get it here, all that stuff. So you don't have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars to be able to participate in the hobby, to even participate in the investment. I mean, this is a bull market list. $10,000 Suzuki Cappuccinos on that list.
Yes.
That's pretty cool, and they make a lot of those cars.
They made a lot of the cars. They were unseen, unobtainium here in the States. But it defines a certain level of cuteness, dare I say that, of coolness. And look at them. If there were one, even though I'm real sure I wouldn't fit in one of them. At least maybe I wouldn't. If I see one, and I've seen the Nissan Figaros and some of what they call key cars, K cars, they're just cool and they're cute and they're accessible. So I think that says a lot about. And I come back to that accessibility part. You talk about the Toyota pickup on the bull market list. I remember as a young man, so this was out of high school, and then I worked at Matterns Foreign Auto, where I was a technician for a brief period of time. One of my colleagues there, one of the other techs, he had one of those Toyotas. And it was the stuff that he did to it, right? It was jacked up.
Right.
Do we still use that term? Lifted? I don't know. And he had the lights on it, and he had these modifications and a big Alpine stereo. And whereas I was driving my MGB, because that was the image I wanted to promote.
What, that you were a glutton for punishment?
Well, okay, but you know,
Or you like to be broken down?
it was just my thing, right? He wanted
Yeah.
that image of rough and tough, and I doubt that his truck, that I certainly don't ever remember, he was a really neat kid, ever saw 1 ounce or mile of off-road.
Right, sure.
But it was projecting a certain image of the small town where I grew up.
But you know, it's funny, like the movie Back to the Future, right? At the end of Back to the Future, he gets a truck. What was it? It was a Toyota,
Yeah.
right? I mean, with the lights and the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
So I think about that, I'm like, oh my God, like I would love to have one of those. I mean, this is a bad association, but like look at Ford Broncos today. Both, you know, 70s Ford Broncos, but look at the O.J. Simpson Ford Bronco,
Yeah.
right? Those things are going crazy. I've said I will have an O.J. Simpson Ford Bronco one day.
Really?
Oh, and look, I'm not an O.J. Simpson fan. I remember watching that Ford Bronco. I remember thinking
The whole world was watching that
right,
Ford
but,
Bronco.
you know, look, I love Fords, right? That's a cool Ford truck that I don't have that
with
I would
you.
love to have. Yeah, there was a time I could have bought one for $5,500. I mean, I just watched one sell the other day for $38,000 or $40,000.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that, you know, 10 owners, rusted. I mean, it wasn't that nice.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how the association, you know, it goes back to what we said. It's generational. What was cool when, you know, when I wanted one when I was 16 and couldn't have one, if I can do it today, I'm going for it. Right?
Well, and
Which,
you know, that defines the whole Radwood scene, which
Right.
is now part of the Haggerty family, and, you know, seeing that era of car, and, you know, when you go to a Radwood event, they dress in the period correctness, and you know, right, I don't watch much TV anymore. I'm never really home, but if you said, what's good TV? I'm like, well, the last time they made good TV, it was Miami Vice. So, yeah, it's all part of that.
well, look,
that
every
whole
time
deal.
somebody comes in here and sees these cars, they're like, oh, Testarossa, Miami Vice. Do you have a white one?
Yeah.
Right? I mean, so like, they don't have to be car people, but they're asking for a white Testarossa.
Yeah.
Right? Which one's the Magnum PI car? Right?
No, they do ask. That's right.
That's
That's
what
right.
happens
That's
all the
reality.
time. You know, which is interesting because this is a car that I find very interesting. The McLaren SLR.
Wow.
This is a car that before I bought it, I called you.
You did.
And I said, Ramsey, tell me about this. Is this going to be an investable car? Is it not? Blah, blah. Your first question was, Adam, have you ever driven one?
I did. This is a true conversation. This really
And I
happened.
said no. And you said, I forget what it was. It was funny. It was something along the lines of,
I remember the comment. I made the comments, having been in them on a few occasions, that it is more like a race car with a Mercedes badge on it than a real road car, what you associate with that level of comfort and smoothness of it.
yeah, look, I thought it would drive, you know, one of my favorite driving Mercedes is the SLS, the Gullwing. We have one of those in the
One of my
collection.
favorite cars.
Unbelievable car. So I'm like, this has to be that on steroids.
Mm.
And when I said that to you, you said, Adam, drives more like a 1987 Dodge Ram pickup on a rocky road.
I don't know if I would call
Yeah.
it such drama, but
you did. And you know, and what was interesting to me was I remember when these things came out. I remember they were unattainable to the normal person.
Very much.
Somebody had them. They were famous. They were going for big dollars. You know, it was a $400,000-$500,000 car. They were selling $750, $1 million. back
McLaren
then.
was at the height of their popularity. Their Formula One race team was doing exceptionally well. I mean, this was a big deal that McLaren and Mercedes came together to create this car.
Right. And then what happened? Then all of a sudden these things plummet.
Yeah.
You know, and I don't know why. They certainly didn't make a lot of them.
No.
The only thing I would say is that speaks to your first point where it's serviceability,
There we go.
usability,
Yeah.
enjoyability, right? Like this is one of the coolest cars we have that is always the last car on the list that anybody wants to drive because the driving experience is just not there. And if you read what they say about it in the bull market, you know, the driving experience, it's a fantastic automobile.
It is truly a 10/10 type of car.
But if you compare it to the driving experience of this R8, it's two totally different things. So I would argue that's kind of why they fell out of favor, because everybody that could afford them, they could buy them, but they didn't want to drive them.
Yeah.
So then nobody wanted them.
Yeah.
But now, look who's buying them, right?
It's that next generation.
Yeah, and millennials even.
Yes.
I mean, you know, according to the data, that's the bulk of who's buying these cars. And now, you know, they've gone from $200,000 18 months ago to $450,000, $500,000.
Well, I think there's a certain element of certain car. I mean, it's a super car. It is it literally by definition at the time of its birth and introduction to the world, and so today. I also think, Adam, that when it comes to cars like this, and quite frankly for anything in your collection, there comes a certain inflection point where a car will fall out of appeal. It will fall out of desirability, as this one did. It went through a cycle. We talked about this versus the Carrera GT and the cycles that they've gone through with Porsche enthusiasts, where they get to a point and then even guys like me, I say guys like me, look at the car and say, wait a minute. What are those selling for?
That's a lot of car for the money.
That's a lot of car. It's a cliche, but it's an accurate one. And the market just won't really. Now, maybe that's a moving target. And I think when you think about Ferraris, I watched Daytonas go through this process, where Daytonas were just unobtainable. And then more of them came to the market, and and I watched collectors say, oh, I'm going to wait. And then all of a sudden, they realized, I'm not waiting anymore. And we began to see some stabilization, and we would call it a plateau or trough, and then sure enough, the car just, there's just a certain point where you just have to say, oh, at that price, I'm going to buy it.
Right. And, and part of what I like is if you can time it right, if you can start buying it after that point,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
The likelihood of it ever going back to where it got down to, which made you realize it, is pretty slim.
Let's
right?
hope you're that savvy.
But I mean, if you look at it historically, that's probably, Daytonas were cheap. They got really, really expensive.
Yes.
They didn't go back to what they were.
No.
They certainly got softer.
Yes.
But the likelihood of them going back to where they were and exceeding that, I would put my money on that far before I would say that I could ever buy one again for $75,000.
Yeah.
Right? Which is part of why I like the investment, because, we just went through 24 months of what I would say the most, certainly in my lifetime, the most aggressive appreciation of automobiles, period. And, from the standpoint of trying to buy and sell cars as a car dealership, it makes it impossible to do that because the prices just kept going up and up. The retail prices to the consumer, I mean, there's a limit to what they can pay.
Yeah.
So it didn't make a lot of sense. But what it does do is it fuels the guy that has this 512 BBI that says, I'm never going to sell it. But he bought it for 50 grand when it was out of favor, right? Yeah. And now all of a sudden it's 350 grand. And he says, you know what, honey? We can buy a lake house, pay cash. If I just sell the car, I never use it, I blah, 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 right? So then all of a sudden you get some really great examples that you were never going to get access to because they're taking advantage of a time when the values are going up.
Yeah.
So we almost doubled our collection over the past 18 months because instead of buying cars to buy and sell, we took advantage of opportunities of cars. We have a 328 over here, it has 800 one-owner miles.
Oh, that's that. Okay, yes.
The guy saw that the market started going crazy, and he was like, "I didn't want to sell it. I was going to keep it forever, but I can't let this opportunity pass."
Yes.
Right. But when the market starts to close, kind of not close, but simmer down, right? There's zero risk I'm going to go out there and sell that car.
Yeah.
Nor are 90% of the people that have bought one in this market. So the 10% that come out to the market, right?
Yes.
It's not enough examples to drop the values.
To impact. It could get to that point in time.
But a lot would have to be going wrong, right? The people that buy them, we would all have to just end up in a really terrible spot and have to liquidate. I mean, it would be a flurry of billions of dollars worth of collectible cars that had to be liquidated at the same time, simply because there's just not that much volume.
But when I've seen certain cars in the past where they get hot and everybody just starts sell, and it begins to temper that.
But don't you you look at real estate, right? You look at a house you bought 40 years ago, you paid 25 grand for it.
Wow.
It goes up, it's 500 grand. It goes down, it's 425.
Yes.
It's never going back to 25 grand.
Never, ever.
Or today's equivalent, right?
Yeah.
I understand inflation and all that, right?
Right.
So it's the same kind of thing. When it goes down, they can go up like this. If you pick the right ones, when they go down, it's a much more shallow depreciation.
Yeah.
And if you keep it long enough, it'll go up again.
The key phrase there is if you pick the right one.
Well, that's part of why you're here. That's part of what we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
It's part of trying to help educate and explain part of what it is that we like to do. Because, look, I don't really enjoy working in general, which is why I started this company, because I don't feel like I'm working. I get to go out and identify things that I thought were really cool. And like I said, I looked up that a lot of them are worth a lot of money. Right?
To my employer at Haggerty, I'm working. I just want to be real clear about something. So
right, but you don't really feel like you wake. I mean, I don't think you wake up and you struggle to go to work because right. We say it all the time. You walk through here and this is what we're working on.
Yeah.
It's
tough day in the office.
No, that's right.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Okay, but I want to make a disclaimer. I'm hearing this, and I know that here in Atlanta, where you're based, and throughout the Southeast, and if I have anything to say about it to clients all over the country, you are one of the best of the best of the best. So, and I know your friends and your fans are listening. Disclaimer: we're talking about all of this, and what is it you and I wake up and do every day, Monday through Sunday, 7 days a week, morning, noon, and night. You and I are swimming in this. We are surrounded by it. We have the data. We have the asset, we have the team, we have the people, and all of the information. Everywhere I go, everything I do. I've been on the road today. I've been on the road this will be like the 12th day. Going home though, tonight. And everywhere I've been and everything I've done has to do with this industry. Listeners, fans and friends of Merlin Auto Group, and one of the most dynamic men in the industry. Remember now, it's not just the sales that I so admire about what you do. It's the service. It's that unique combination that you do both. I want our listeners to make sure they understand that we talk about this, but this is what you do. You are a professional. It's okay to be enthusiastic. It's okay to wake up and say, I want to make a decision. I want to invest. And if that's what they have to tell themselves to finally get a cool car they can have some fun with, more power to them. But please come to Adam Merlin, come to Merlin Auto Group and have the conversation about my passions are boiling over, my bank account runneth over, a wonderful, wonderful XY axis to be in: reliability, serviceability, accessibility, usability, market passions, desirability. Was it truly special then for more than just you? These are the kind of things where people have to come to Merlin Auto Group and sit down and have that conversation and truly be savvy. I've bought some stocks in my past, and essentially if I've bought 50, 52 of them have failed, right? And so I count on a professional, and I hear it. Oh, well, that means you have to pay them this and you have to extol these funds.
Sure.
But you know what that guy does? He wakes up every day and he is swimming in it. He's watching videos I don't want to watch. He's reading papers I don't want to read. He's listening to boring, dull conversations that I read the Wall Street Journal. I get it every weekend. You know what I do, Adam? I flip right to the page with Neil where he writes about cars.
Right.
I want to pay the guy that's reading the other 59 pages other than the one that Neil. People need to come and rely on you to make these decisions. So don't take what we say as just a blanket endorsement to go do what you want. Please, please come to the people that swim it.
Well, so it's interesting you say that, because I do try to draw a lot of parallels to people that have some money and they go and they invest it on their own with all these online platforms, and why pay the big brokerage fees and blah blah. And I'm sure there's scumbag brokers out there that take advantage of you, that don't generate returns, that are not great. But if you vet a professional that takes the time to understand what your goals are, I guarantee you they will be able to put your money to work and generate better returns than you're going to be able to do it yourself when you get home from your day job, where you're a professional whatever, but it's not investing your money.
The truth is, Adam, if we really want to get down into it, if you looked at my personal stock portfolio that I've picked, it's Ferrari, it's Ford, it's Honda. I didn't make any form of an educated decision when I bought those stocks. It's because I like cars.
Right.
But I count on, people need to rely on you to make educated and informed decisions for the actual automobile.
Right. Well, and people spend enough money. It's amazing. People hire real estate agents.
Yeah.
Right, to buy their house.
Yes.
Right, but then they go and they navigate this whole car scene on their own. And it's true, there's not a lot of professionals in the car scene. Part of the reason we have an affiliation is, there's a lot of dealers out there that would love to be affiliated with you guys. I'm not sure that that's possible. And there's a lot of auction houses that would love to be affiliated with us, and we're not particularly interested in those types of affiliations.
When we started Broad Arrow Group as chief sales officer, one of the programs that I was tasked to develop was a special, intimate relationship, and that's personal, it's fiduciary, it's in every aspect of what Broad Arrow Group does, both buying and selling, and you were the first one to whom we came. I mean, that was, bam, a no-brainer. Everybody on our team, everyone that has met you, you have been wired into us from the beginning, but that has everything to do with the fact that every experience that I've ever known a client to have with Adam Merlin and Merlin Auto Group and your team, especially that service department, and that I have had with you, has been of the highest, utmost ethical standard, and that is why we are honored at Broad Arrow Group to have that deeper than deep, that just beyond the tertiary level relationship with you. You are a direct source for us, and that's because you're the best at what you do.
That's very kind. I do want to ask one question. Is the reason the R8 made the bull market list because that's the first car that Haggerty and Broad Arrow as an auction company ever sold live?
This is a very, very special Audi. Not the least of which is because some Colombian named Juan Pablo Montoya was the original owner of the car. But yes, Adam Merlin, the whole world, it is an honor. And you, good sir, although I didn't really fully expect it, you said to us on day one when I started, I am going to be there and I am going to purchase the first car that Broad Arrow Group ever sells at auction.
Thank God it wasn't a Model J Duesenberg.
Thank you. I wish if I had known, I would have made arrangements. But you came out to Monterey at our auction at the Haggerty Motor Lux event. That was a pretty cool event.
Very good.
And you were the high bidder on the very first car that Broad Arrow Group ever sold at auction. But I don't mind saying how just perfectly ironic that only a few months, like 6 months later, this car would be recognized as one of our 2023 bull market list cars. And I think this car is probably a textbook example of some of what caused that car to be on that list, and I hope caused you to be quite comfortable with that purchase. First of all, you have a car that's incredibly reliable. You have a car that is extremely accessible. This car was special at its introduction. This one even more so in that it has a good old-fashioned manual transmission in the car.
Gated even.
Gated manual transmission with the slots in there. And quite frankly, this is a low mileage, top flight example of that car. And this is something that, as long as it's looked after and maintained, which your shop can do, should be a perfectly usable car for many, many, many years to come. And they didn't make a whole lot of them. They made a bunch. But I mean, at the time when it was introduced, it was an evolutionary break from what Audi had been bringing out to the world. It had a lot to do with their motorsports tie-in at the time, their all-conquering Audi R8 that they took to Le Mans and just cleaned up. So yeah, I think this is probably an exemplar model of all the things that we've talked about.
Oh, I used to buy them for 60 grand.
Yeah.
That's a hell of a lot of car for 60 grand.
Not that long ago, well, maybe long enough ago, you could have bought a 288 GTO for 60 grand.
Oh, I know.
Yeah,
I know.
And now they're $3 million cars.
Yeah, I know. The three things that you would advise somebody to look at. This car for us was an incredible example from a condition perspective.
Yes.
Super low miles, documented ownership history, happened to be Juan Pablo Montoya, which was cool. These were all things that excited us, on a car that I would not have argued was collectible. In fact, when Ramsey said, you should take a look at this car, I was like, I'm going to buy it because it's the first car, but it's not collectible. Like, I'm going to buy it, and I like driving them. I think they're fun. I got lucky. It's now on the bull market list.
Yeah.
You watch what the V10 manuals do, and it's the tide rises, which is the same theory on Ferrari.
That is very much the case.
When the most expensive car that ever sold in the world is a $70 million Ferrari, that Mondial in that back corner there is not going to be worth 15 grand. It's got the same brand on it. It's a T. It's a 93 T with 15,000 miles. Engine's never been out. One family owned. Exactly as it was when I left the show.
You know I love those cars.
I do too.
They're not bad cars if they're dialed in, and
They drive great. The coupes are awesome.
I think that all comes back to, if you really want to know what to look out for, rely on a professional
Right.
to guide you and ask you a series of questions about what are you going to do with the car.
What the perception that there's a lack of available information, right? And what I find very fantastic with the bull market list, right? Like, you know, when Haggerty gives their little excerpt, I mean, they talk about the car and all that, but then it's like the Haggerty analysis, you know, it's 26% of the insurance quotes we get on McLaren SLRs are from ages 41 to 49.
They do have
right?
a creepy amount of data.
So that, just having that data, which all lends to, you know, who's going to have that data? Like, as a professional, we're going to have that data. We're going to know it's available. We're going to mine that.
Our first year at Broad Arrow Group has been, I think it's fair to say, an unprecedented success. Due in large part to you and to great petrol heads like yourself. You've been a real influencer. I think I can use that term, right? You're an, you're an influencer, Adam. You're an influencer in the industry because of your knowledge base, because of the service that you provide after the sale, as well as the great sale. But you're an influencer because we're here, we're having this conversation, and you've got a great team of people behind you that make this possible. You go to the events, you're seen. So you've been a part of that Broad Arrow Group success in its first year. Over 800 cars sold across 3 auctions. I think we did okay. We worked really, really, really hard. 2023, I think, is going to be a very interesting year for the collector car hobby. And people say, oh, do you think cars are going to be impacted by what's going on in the economy? Adam, I think milk is going to be impacted by what's going on in the economy, and fuel, and watches, and wine, and concrete, and metal, and everything else. So I think cars will invariably be a part of that. And you can get all of that data at a place like Haggerty, and they have their Haggerty Market Index. But more importantly, as we talked about, come to the professionals. You are swallowing and chewing and analyzing all of those data points, and you can help people understand what 2023 is going to be like. And a part of how you get a better understanding of that is go to the great events. And those events can be events where there's not just an auction, but it's a great concours, it's great petrol heads from all over the world. We'll be at Amelia, and I know that your team will be at Amelia as well, Adam, because it's such a special thing. The first weekend in March, our auction will be there. We are now the official auction of the Amelia Island Concours. So, you know, be a part of that scene.
Hey, look, you know, since I met you at an auction at Amelia, when however many years ago that was, 100% attendance. I do love the auction.
Yeah, it is.
But you know, I think it's interesting. I think 2023 is going to be a great test of the theory of when the market softens, how impacted are the cars, and are certain cars impacted greater than others, and you know, is there really a new established kind of baseline, or does it go way below that? And unfortunately, over the past 3+ years, everything that's happening in this world is unprecedented, right? Unprecedented.
That is
so,
a big word, yeah.
You know, so it is a little frightening. You know, I view it as a tremendous opportunity because with some risk, there's usually some good reward. The good news is we know the cars aren't going to zero, right? The good news is, you know, for me as a collector, for Merlin Auto Group as a collector and as a business, you know, this business is because of the people that we've been able to find that shared a common vision and were excited to do it. And these cars that have realized some incredible appreciation, would not have been able to do that without having the right people who can basically enable this sickness that I have to go and find these cars, right? And it just speaks to, you know, but it's people like you, right? It's Adam, I got one of these coming up at this auction. It makes sense to go. It's Adam, you should look at this Audi R8, which I know you used to buy for 50 cents on the dollar for what this one's going to bring.
Yeah.
But it's actually a collectible car, and here's why I think so.
But
right?
you know, that's why I don't call you when I think, oh, there's a Model J, and nope, not Adam.
Right.
No. So,
but you will call me on the Pulse Light Stars.
No, I did not call you on the Pulse Light Star, Adam.
Look up Pulse Light Star. Mark my words, collectible car. They made like 43. We have one. we are in the market for more, so if you have one and want to sell.
And to all the friends and fans of the Merlin Auto Group, I promised you, this is a very personal conversation. If you sell that Pulse Lightstar and you make $1, what am I going to eat, Adam? I'm going to eat my hat. That is what and you told me I better
find a tasty hat.
Oh, come on, man.
I mean, the only thing I have going for you is I really like it, although it only ran 1 day since we got it. Actually 2 days. Hasn't run since, but we'll get it running again.
I did not advise Adam Merlin to buy a Pulse Lightstar.
Nope. And every time one sells for 3 times what I paid for that one, I do send it to you.
Yes,
So.
You never miss the opportunity.
I don't. But Ramsey, thank you so much for coming. We always appreciate your insights. We appreciate you taking the time to be here with us. And the value that you have.
Adam, it has been truly, and I mean this with all genuineness, to be a part of this with your team, and I really do. Adam, I love you, man, but your whole team is just a really, really cool bunch of petrol heads that have a real passion for every aspect of this business. It is always the best part of my day, my trip to Atlanta to come and see what's going on at Merlin Auto Group. Of course, I'm really excited about what Morgan is doing in the coming year with some of their. It doesn't even make sense with Morgan's new cars that they're bringing out, and the way you've represented that brand. But needless to say, I mean, look, man, this is my juju in here. Everything that you've got, and the service and your guys and the work that they do there. It really is a special treat. I'll tell the world what I admire so much about you, Adam, is you are, and this is such an overused cliche, but you are just a straight player, man. You know, you have been with me through things I have said and done, and I'm like, that probably wasn't my brightest hour. That probably wasn't my brightest piece of advice. And you have said to me, that was probably not your brightest hour, Ramsey, but we're going to continue to grow and work together. And a Pulse Lightstar, I am absolutely confident is not going to be your brightest hour or piece of the decision that you made, but I am thrilled that it's here and it's fun to talk about it. You're one of the best in this business, Adam, and it is why Broad Arrow Group is so honored to be affiliated with you and your team and everything that you're doing here at Merlin Auto Group.